If you have a floating piano bar that is playing music for you above the skies, then there is no need for a concert hall. When I was younger, airplane dinners were more about feasting like royalty than they were about eating peanuts. In this article, we will examine 10 aspects of air travel that were significant during the golden age of aerial travel. There was a time when you did not need to be a contortionist in order to stretch your legs while you were flying. There was a time when airplane cabins were less congested, and seats were broader and offered greater legroom. This resulted in significantly more passenger comfort during flights. Having this additional room allowed people to relax and enjoy their voyage without experiencing any feelings of claustrophobia. When I was younger, flying was more of an adventure than a means of transportation. It was more of a luxury experience than a means of getting from point A to point B. Rather than trying to pack as many seats as possible into the aircraft, airlines prioritized the comfort of their passengers. When compared to the current standard of 28 inches, the seat pitch, which refers to the distance between seats, was approximately 36 to 40 inches back then. Imagine that you are sitting on an aircraft and that you are being served a beautiful supper that is as if you were in a posh restaurant. There was a time when flying on an airline meant that you might anticipate receiving excellent meals aboard. In other words, these were not any old meals. Rather, they were elaborate feasts that were prepared by highly competent chefs. In order to provide passengers with a genuinely sumptuous experience, they were provided foods such as cut roast beef or turkey, and everything was presented on exquisite china with real silverware. Not only was it about the cuisine, but it was also about making flying a unique and memorable experience. In its first-class cabins, Olympic Airways even equipped their flatware with a gold-plated finish. When you were on an aircraft, you would never see someone wearing their pajamas. It was more like a fashion display in the skies. During this time period, passengers and crew members alike wore their most elegant apparel while they were in the air. Due to the fact that air travel was considered a prestigious occasion, it was not uncommon to see men dressed in suits and ties and women dressed in gorgeous dresses and caps. The costumes that flight attendants, also known as stewardesses, wore were designed by renowned fashion houses such as Christian Dior and Chanel. These outfits were meant to attract attention. Because of this chic attitude to air travel, flying became an experience that was both beautiful and unforgettable. The fashion-forward attitude of air travel during this time period was so prevalent that some airlines even held fashion displays right in the aisles of their aircraft. If you can believe it, there was a period when you may have the opportunity to listen to live piano music as you were flying through the skies. During the 1970s, several first-class sections of airplanes were designed to resemble flying luxury lounges, complete with pianos and cocktail bars. The purpose of these lounges was to give a place for passengers to unwind, communicate with one another, and have a drink or two. In most cases, the pianos were electric Wurlitzer organs, rather than the grand pianos that are often found in theaters. Travelers were able to relax and even sing along to tunes that were played by the onboard pianist thanks to this arrangement, which created the ambiance of a sophisticated party in the sky. At the rear of their 747-100 cabin, American Airlines notably installed a piano bar for economy-class passengers, which made the pleasure of listening to live music available to a greater number of passengers. The only thing you needed to do to experience what it felt like to be a famous celebrity was to walk off of an airplane. In the days before jet bridges were invented, passengers would frequently depart from the aircraft by using air stairs or a mobile stairway. This meant that they were able to stroll down the tarmac, during which they were able to feel the breeze and get a close-up view of the airport. Many aircraft, such as the well-known Boeing 727 and the McDonnell Douglas DC-9, were equipped with air stairs as a standard feature. More independence from ground services was afforded by them, and they proved to be particularly effective at smaller airports that lacked sophisticated infrastructure. In 1971, when hijacker D.B. Cooper made his daring escape by parachuting from the back of a Boeing 727, air stairs also played a unique role in the event. Have you ever heard of the fact that airplanes used to have spiral staircases? Architectural design began to take off at the same time that the first commercial airplanes took to the air. There was a significant amount of impact from the aesthetics of aviation on the architecture of airports, as well as the interiors of airplanes. For instance, the Boeing 747, which was first delivered to the public in 1970, was not merely an airplane, but rather a design masterpiece. The cabins were able to accommodate more than 500 passengers, and the ship had 2 stories that were joined by a spiral staircase. Not only did the influence of aviation design remain in the sky, but it also inspired buildings on the ground. One example of this is the TWA terminal at JFK Airport, which was designed by Eero Saarinen and resembles a bird in flight. There was a time when flight engineers were just as important to the operation of an airplane as pilots. Managing and running the intricate systems of an aircraft was the responsibility of a flight engineer, who was sometimes referred to as an air engineer. This individual was an essential member of the crew of an aircraft. Instead of actually piloting the aircraft, they were equipped with a specialized panel that allowed them to monitor and manage several aspects of the aircraft, including the engines and other essential flight systems. To ensure that everything went off without a hitch, these engineers collaborated closely with the pilots, particularly during the takeoff, flying, and landing phases of the flight. Once upon a time, larger aircraft were unable to take off without them. However, with 2 advancements in technology, computers now perform the majority of their functions. Northwest Airlines was the last major passenger airline in the United States to employ flight engineers. In 2009, the airline decommissioned all of its aircraft that were equipped with engineer stations. In the days when flying was still common, it was possible to send a postcard from the air. Postcards of a unique nature were once made available to passengers by airlines while they were in flight. It would be possible for individuals to write messages on these cards, either to share their vacation experiences or simply to say hello from above the clouds. Following the landing, these postcards were sent out to be mailed, sending greetings from one region of the planet to something other. Sending a postcard was a common way to keep in touch with people during this time period, when smartphones and the internet were not yet commercially available. As a result of their one-of-a-kind history and endearing qualities, these postcards that were distributed during flights are now highly sought-after treasures. When airport security was far less stringent, it was much simpler to board a plane than it is to board a bus. There was a time when this was very easy to do. It was not necessary for you to arrive earlier than expected, remove your shoes, or be concerned about the amount of liquid that was included in your carry-on. During that time period, businesses were concerned that metal detectors might frighten travelers and invade their privacy. Over the course of time, this casual approach evolved, particularly as the number of hijackings gradually increased. There were 159 hijackings of aircraft that occurred in the airspace of the United States between May 1961 and the end of 1972. In 1970, New Orleans International Airport became the first airport to implement metal detectors, marking a significant step toward the kind of security that is currently in place. As if they were flying lounges, airplanes were places where smoking was not only permitted but also considered to be the standard. In those days, many airplanes featured designated smoking places where passengers could light up their cigars or cigarettes. These areas were designated specifically for smoking. In the past, passengers would smoke right there in their seats, and the air inside the aircraft would frequently be filled with smoke. This is something that is difficult to imagine now. People didn't really give it much thought at the time, because they didn't know how detrimental smoking is to our health during that time. During the course of the service, flight attendants would even distribute smokas to passengers. The last aircraft in the United States that let passengers to smoke took off in the year 2000, signaling the end of an era in which lighting up in the air was a natural and expected part of the experience.